Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video. Ada for telling my brother's pregnant wife she can give birth and an ally for all I care. So I have a half-brother that is 19 years my junior. He's been living with me since him married in December since my mother, and he had a falling out because he married so young. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. If I had known what I know now, I would not have allowed them come in. He and his wife, 19, are the worst house guests I've ever had. I say guest because they're supposed to be seeking for job and a place to live. I've made it plain from the start that it was just a temporary situation since I have 4 children, 7 females, 5 males, 3 females and 1 male, and my wife works from home. Since they moved in, they have grumbled about how noisy the mornings are and about my food. I do all of the cooking, since I seldom make anything spicy, which my brother's wife prefers. They never clean up after themselves. They'd even complained to my wife about never washing their clothes or providing snacks for my brother's wife throughout the day. They believe my wife and I are their personal assistants/drivers, and they attempt to guilt us when we say no to 4 a.m. McDonald's trips or my brother's wife's harsh remarks, but how we are too young to know better. It all came to a head last week when all of our children were kept at home due to an illness that was going about. Nothing was wrong, but schools and daycares in our region are being extra cautious. I couldn't obtain the day off, so my wife had to cope with 6 children while working. My brother and his wife insisted that they all remain in the same room and that we bring them takeout so that there are no germs near their meals. When my wife suggested that they cook for once since she is so busy, they filled out a form calling her a cruel for forcing a 5-month pregnant lady cook for 8 people and my brother clean while he was trying to sort out business. It came to the point where they were yelling at my wife and my kids were sobbing, and my wife had an anxiety attack. When I received a sauce SMS, I went home, but my brother was waiting at the door, weeping about not being our and how his pregnant wife is hungry. When I arrived at my wife's workplace and she revealed everything that made me see red, I informed them they had 30 days to leave my home and it was time to face the real world. They both attempted to fight with me, claiming that none of them could drive and that my brother still didn't have a job, but I told them I didn't care. My brother's wife stated they'd end up destitute, and if anything happened to my niece, it was all my responsibility. I told her roughly what the title implies, and she burst into tears, calling me a callous jerk. When I described my position to my sister, she branded me a jerk for being so insensitive to 2 teens, but when I asked when she was going to let them move in, she hung up. I've had several social media postings about me, as well as angry phone calls from my sister's husband and my brother's pals. Edit. So, as of 1 hour ago, my brother and his wife were booted out. My sister-in-law told me this morning that she'd make the next 30 days hell on earth for us by blasting music while the baby slept, watching horror movies on the family TV while my kids were in the room, destroying both bathrooms and leaving the tubs full, and cooking a ton of food without eating much of it or cleaning up. They were extremely rude and went out of their way to insult my wife and children, thinking I had to legally allow them to stay the 30 days when I don't. You can imagine their faces when I started throwing their belongings into the front garden. They threatened to call the cops when that didn't work, and they knew I wasn't going to back down. My brother even had the audacity to demand money for 3 months' rent and a deposit for their own apartment, which I told him to F off, and my wife advised them to go over to my sister's place, where she would aid them. They ended up pleading for hotel/food money, but I warned them to kick rocks, and I'd call the cops if they weren't off my property in 20 minutes. I'm not sure where they are now, but based on how many times my sister has called me, they're probably at her place. I've also modified my voicemail message to say, if you're upset because I threw out bother and sill, you take them in or give them money. If you won't or can't, stop the F up. Thank you everyone for your help. Story 2. Ada for calling my grandmother insane for having beef with a 16-year-old. My paternal grandma and I, 19 female, have a complex connection. She is normally kind to everyone, but she is very cruel to my younger brother, 16 male. It has always been. I have many hypotheses, but my grandmother thinks it's because my brother is immature/bratty/disrespectful, etc. My brother is a little more of a troublemaker than the rest of us, but he is far from a nasty child. Anyway, my parents, elder siblings, and younger brother refuse to talk to her at all, and although I truly want to sever touch with the old lady, especially since she's all alone now, I felt a bit horrible for her. My family is all right with my paying her visits and chatting to her on occasion. When grandmother phoned last week, I picked up my brother from school. She stated it was an emergency, so I asked my brother if he would mind if I went over to her house right away. He said everything was okay, so we left. My grandmother was texting the important messages the whole time. We eventually arrive, and my brother chooses to join us since grandmother sent extremely concerning SMS, but guess what? The emergency was that she had run out of avocados. She never mentioned avocados in her writings. My brother became enraged after missing his sports session and said, "This is so aggravating, and so your avocados." My grandmother was surprised and labeled my brother. She brought up his ADHD and how he was the consequence of an affair, which he isn't, by the way. I was irritated as well since she was being especially harsh for no reason and called my grandmother nuts, telling her that she was truly crazy for having fight with a child. Also, it's only avocados. We departed after some more squabbling. My grandmother continues to message me, stating that I shattered her heart and that she expected more from me, that I was quite disrespectful, and that this is bad for her health. I refuse to react to her messages and want to avoid touch with her, but my elder sister told me yesterday that I was incorrect, which makes me skeptical. According to my sister, my brother insulted her first, and she just replied. My sister also believes that my brother deserved a severe talking to in the first place. The only reason I'm skeptical is because my sister despises our grandmother. That has to signify something, doesn't it? Also, my grandmother has health difficulties that intensify when she is stressed, and she contacted me only a few hours ago stating she nearly collapsed a few times because of my brother and me. So, AITA for protecting my brother and referring to my grandmother as insane/crazy at it. It's been a hard day, so I mistyped my brother's age. Sorry, update. For those who inquired, here is a brief update. It hasn't been long, but I doubt anything will happen after what occurred, so I'm posting now. So my younger brother decided to take things into his own hands, nearly ruining everything. His pals and he were going to Egg, my grandmother's home. My elder brother discovered what was going on and put a stop to it. We, my siblings and I, were irritated, but then my brother had a nervous breakdown. He mentioned some awful things, but essentially, he's been in bodily agony since the event. My mother happened to come in on this and was furious. She was angry with my brothers and me for keeping the entire affair hidden, but it was my grandmother who irritated me the most. Mom went to my grandmother's place and blew out when I finished describing everything. She forced me and my brother to accompany her in holy. I've never seen my mother so enraged. She informed my grandmother that she was tired of her acting like a kid and that she should be glad that I still spoke to her. She called my grandmother a jealous witch who needed to grow up. She then demanded that she apologize to my brother and me. My grandmother apologized but refused to look at my brother. This enraged my mother, and she made some very accurate judgments about my grandmother's mentality. Then we walked away. My grandmother was stunned the whole time. My mother never yells. She's what some call a pushover. But wow, you guys. Anyway, for some reason, Mom apologized to us as well, and then she gave everyone ice cream. My father is returning tonight. Mom informed him of everything, and he apologized for his absence as well. They both feel bad, but I don't believe they realize we didn't tell them because we didn't trust them, but because we didn't trust them. In any case, brother has a therapy session this week to speak about everything and work on the egging houses stuff, but that's all. Since my mother raged at her, my grandmother hasn't contacted me. I said it in the comments, but she despises my brother because he is a carbon duplicate of my mother, and my mother is lovely. My mother and grandmother both competed in beauty pageants as children. My grandmother never won a single one, although my mother did. That's where her animosity for my mother came from. It's mind-boggling how all of this is connected to something so terrible. Also, my grandmother liked being in charge, so when my mother refused to allow my brother to compete in these stupid beauty pageants, my grandmother went insane and accused my mother of cheating on my father. Finally, despite knowing all of this, I'm a complete for wanting to give my grandmother a chance. I feel as if I'm going nuts trying to figure out why. Anyway, thank you for your kind words. I've come to know that Granny is not my duty.